The gunshot echoed across the dusty plains as Brielle Nolan's coach rolled into Hamilton, Montana territory, in the summer of 1878. She gripped the leather seat, heart racing as the driver shouted obscenities at the bandits retreating into the distance. This was not the welcome she had envisioned when leaving Philadelphia to take over her late uncle's medical practice, her new beginning now baptized in gunpowder and fear. "You all right in there, Miss Nolan?" the driver called, his voice rough from years of tobacco and hard living. "Yes," she answered, though her trembling hand suggested otherwise. "Are we close to town? Just over that ridge. We'll be in Hamilton proper in 10 minutes, God willing, and no more interruptions." Brielle smoothed her traveling skirt, trying to regain composure. At 26, she had faced plenty of challenges, medical school being chief among them, but nothing had prepared her for the wildness of the West. Still, she had chosen this path after everything that happened back east, and she would not falter now. Hamilton appeared on the horizon, a collection of wooden buildings stretching along a wide main street. Despite its modest size, the town bustled with activity, horses tied to hitching posts, wagons delivering goods, and townspeople moving with purpose along the boardwalks. Her new home, such as it was. The coach pulled to a stop outside the Hamilton Hotel, a 3-story wooden structure that was easily the tallest building in town. "Miss Nolan, welcome to Hamilton," said a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, approaching as Brielle stepped down from the coach. "I'm Martha Wilson, the mayor's wife. We've been expecting you." "Thank you for the welcome," Brielle replied, straightening her hat. "I hope my uncle's practice is still in order." "Oh yes, though it's been nearly 3 months since his passing. People have been traveling to Missoula for medical care, some not making it back. You're a godsend, truly." "I'll need to inspect the office and equipment immediately. Medicine waits for no one." Mrs. Wilson nodded approvingly. "Your uncle mentioned you were determined." "The office is just down the street. We've had it cleaned weekly, waiting for your arrival." As they walked, Brielle felt eyes upon her, curious glances from shopkeepers, open stares from men lounging outside the saloon, and whispers from women gathered near the general store. A female doctor was clearly still a novelty, even in 1878. The medical office was a modest building with a small attached living quarters. Inside, the examination room was meticulously organized, with glass cabinets containing medicines and supplies. Her uncle's medical books lined one wall and a desk occupied the corner. It wasn't Philadelphia General Hospital, but it would serve. "This will do nicely," Brielle said, running her fingers along the examination table. "Your uncle was a fine doctor," Mrs. Wilson said. "The town mourned him deeply. I hope to honor his legacy. Will you be needing any help getting settled? I could send my daughter over." "That won't be necessary," Brielle interrupted, perhaps too quickly. "I prefer to organize things myself. Medical supplies have a particular order." Mrs. Wilson seemed taken aback but nodded. "Very well. The general store closes at 6 if you need provisions, and the Rusty Spur serves decent meals, though it can get rowdy in the evenings." After Mrs. Wilson departed, Brielle finally allowed her shoulders to slump. The journey had been exhausting, both physically and emotionally. Philadelphia seemed a world away now, along with its painful memories. She moved to the window, watching Hamilton's residents go about their business. A man caught her attention, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair visible beneath his cowboy hat. He was helping an elderly woman load packages into a wagon, laughing at something she said. There was an ease to him, a confidence without arrogance that drew the eye. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up suddenly, directly at her window. Brielle stepped back, embarrassed to be caught staring, but not before noticing his striking features and the quick, curious smile that crossed his face. She turned away, focusing instead on the task at hand. Hamilton needed a doctor, and that's what she would be. Nothing more. The first week passed in a flurry of activity. Brielle organized the office, inventoried supplies, and sent orders to Miss Ola for what was lacking. Word spread quickly of the new doctor's arrival, and patients began trickling in mostly minor ailments at first, as if testing her abilities. She treated them all with equal care. A ranch hand with a badly infected cut, a child with a persistent cough, a minor with a dislocated shoulder. With each successful treatment, the skepticism in their eyes faded a little more, replaced by cautious respect. On her 8th day in Hamilton, as evening approached and she was preparing to close the office, urgent pounding rattled her door. "Doctor, we need you at the Blackwater Ranch now." Brielle grabbed her medical bag, following the breathless ranch hand to a waiting wagon. As they jolted along the rough road leading out of town, he explained. "One of the hands got thrown from his horse, hit a fence post on the way down. He's bleeding something awful." 20 minutes later, they arrived at a sprawling ranch house surrounded by outbuildings. Men were gathered on the porch, faces grim. They parted as Brielle approached, revealing a figure lying still on a makeshift pallet. She knelt beside the injured man, quickly assessing his condition. A deep gash ran across his forehead, and his right arm bent at an unnatural angle. But most concerning was the blood soaking through his shirt from what appeared to be a puncture wound. "I need clean water, cloth, and better light," she commanded, rolling up her sleeves. "You heard the doctor," came a deep voice from behind her. "Move." Brielle glanced up to see the same man she'd observed from her window days earlier. Up close, his features were even more striking: dark blue eyes under straight brows, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and that same quiet confidence. "I'm Nathan Blackett," he said, kneeling opposite her. "This is my ranch. What do you need?" "Pressure on this wound while I check his breathing," she replied, handing him a clean cloth. They worked together with surprising synchronicity, Nathan following her instructions without question, anticipating her needs before she voiced them. When she needed to set the broken arm, he held the man steady, speaking low words of encouragement though the injured ranch hand was barely conscious. 2 hours later, the crisis had passed. The ranch hand, a young man named Tommy, was stabilized and resting in one of the bunkhouse beds with Brielle's strict instructions for his care. "You saved his life," Nathan said as he walked her back to the wagon. "Doc Wilson was good, but I've never seen anyone work like that." "Medical school trains you for emergencies," she replied, trying to ignore how her pulse quickened under his gaze. "Philadelphia, right? That's what Martha Wilson said." Brielle nodded. "I graduated last year, long way from home." "This is home now," she said firmly. Nathan studied her for a moment. "Well then, welcome home, Dr. Nolan. Hamilton's lucky to have you." In the moonlight, with his hat pushed back and his sleeves rolled up, Nathan Blackett looked more like a figure from a romantic novel than a real man standing before her. Brielle quickly tamped down that thought. She hadn't come west for romance, quite the opposite. "I should get back," she said. "I'll need to check on Tommy tomorrow." "I'll bring you back myself," Nathan replied. "First light, that would be acceptable." As the wagon pulled away, Brielle felt Nathan's gaze following her. She didn't turn back, focusing instead on the road ahead and the cool night air that helped clear her mind of inappropriate thoughts about cowboys with kind eyes. True to his word, Nathan arrived at her door just as dawn broke the following morning. He sat tall and easy in the saddle, leading a second horse by the reins. "Good morning, Doctor. Hope you don't mind riding instead of taking the wagon. It's faster, and the trail's pretty this time of day." Brielle hesitated. She hadn't been on a horse since childhood visits to her grandparents' farm. "I'm not much of a rider, Mr. Blackett." "Nathan, please. And don't worry, Penny here is gentle as they come," raised her from a foal. The mare was indeed beautiful, with a chestnut coat that gleamed in the early morning light. Brielle approached cautiously, stroking the horse's velvety nose. "She likes you," Nathan observed. "Most horses are good judges of character." With his help, Brielle mounted, arranging her split riding skirt modestly. The ride to Blackwater Ranch took them through rolling grasslands dotted with wildflowers and stands of aspen trees. Despite her initial nervousness, Brielle found herself enjoying the gentle rhythm of the horse's gait and the magnificent scenery. "How long have you had the ranch?" she asked as they rode side by side. "Going on 8 years now. Started with just 50 acres and a dream after the war. Now we're up to nearly 2,000 acres and one of the most successful cattle operations in the territory." "You fought in the war," Nathan nodded, his expression momentarily darkening. "Union cavalry. Enlisted when I was 18, right at the end. Saw enough to last a lifetime, though." Brielle understood that look. She'd seen it in the eyes of wounded soldiers who came through Philadelphia General during her training. Some wounds never fully healed. "What brought you all the way out here from the East?" he asked, changing the subject. Brielle considered her answer carefully. "My uncle's passing created an opportunity. I wanted to practice medicine somewhere I could truly make a difference." "No husband objecting to your moving so far away?" "No husband," she replied curtly. Nathan seemed to sense he'd touched a nerve and steered the conversation to safer topics: the upcoming cattle drive, the town's plans for Independence Day celebrations, the unusually mild spring they'd been enjoying. Tommy was awake when they arrived, his color much improved from the previous night. Brielle changed his dressings, checked his broken arm, and listened to his lungs, pleased with his progress. "You'll live," she told him with a small smile, "though you might want to choose more accommodating horses in the future." "Yes, madam," Tommy replied sheepishly. "Thank you for patching me up." As Brielle packed her supplies, she became aware of Nathan watching her from the doorway, his expression thoughtful. "You're good with them," he said as they walked outside. "My men, I mean." "Most city doctors I've met treat ranch hands like they're a different species. Patients are patients, Mr. Blackett. Background doesn't determine worth." His smile was genuine. "You're not what I expected, Dr. Nolan." "I get that a lot," she replied dryly. Over the next few weeks, Brielle fell into a routine in Hamilton. Mornings were spent seeing patients. Afternoons often involved house calls to outlying farms and ranches, and evenings were dedicated to reading medical journals and correspondence with former classmates still practicing in Philadelphia. Nathan Blackett became a regular presence in her life, though always with plausible reasons, bringing Tommy in for checkups, delivering fresh vegetables from his ranch garden, since you're too busy saving lives to grow your own, or stopping by with questions about minor medical matters that Brielle suspected he could have solved himself. The townsfolk noticed, of course. Brielle overheard whispers at the general store and saw knowing glances when Nathan tipped his hat to her on the street. She maintained a professional demeanor, even as she found herself looking forward to his visits more than she cared to admit. On a warm June evening, Brielle was summoned to deliver Mrs. Peterson's baby, her first obstetrical case in Hamilton. The labor was long and difficult, testing Brielle's skills and endurance. By dawn, Mrs. Peterson had given birth to a healthy baby boy, but something in Brielle's expression must have changed as she placed the squalling infant in his mother's arms. "He's perfect," Mrs. Peterson whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Look at what we made, John." Mr. Peterson, who had paced anxiously throughout the night, approached the bed with awe on his face, gently touching his son's tiny hand. The intimacy of the moment, the pure joy radiating from the new parents, sent a sharp pang through Brielle's chest. She quietly excused herself, stepping out onto the Petersons' front porch to compose herself. The sun was just rising over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Brielle took several deep breaths, willing away the memories and regrets that threatened to overwhelm her. "Dr. Nolan." She turned to find Nathan approaching, leading his horse. He carried a basket covered with a checkered cloth. "Martha Wilson said you'd been called here last night," he explained. "Thought you might need breakfast after a long night." The simple kindness undid her. To her horror, tears welled in her eyes. Nathan's expression changed instantly from casual friendliness to concern. "What is it? Did something happen?" "No," she said quickly, wiping at her eyes. "The baby is fine. Healthy boy, 8 pounds at least." "Then what's wrong?" Brielle shook her head, unable to explain. "Nothing, just tired. Thank you for the breakfast, but I should get home." Nathan studied her face for a long moment. "Let me give you a ride at least. You look dead on your feet." Too exhausted to argue, Brielle allowed him to help her onto his horse, then mount behind her. The solid warmth of him at her back was oddly comforting as they rode slowly through the awakening town. At her door, he helped her down, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Brielle," he said softly, the first time he'd used her given name. "Whatever it is, you can tell me." She looked up at him, at the genuine concern in those blue eyes, and for a moment she almost did. Almost told this man she barely knew about the fever that had nearly killed her 3 years ago, about waking in the hospital to the doctor's solemn face, as he explained what the infection had done to her body, about her fiancé's poorly concealed relief when she broke their engagement. Instead, she stepped back. "Thank you for the ride, Mr. Blackett, and the breakfast." His expression flickered with disappointment, but he only nodded. "Anytime, doctor. Get some rest." Brielle watched him ride away, wondering why it felt like she'd just made a terrible mistake. 2 days later, a fierce summer storm descended on Hamilton, turning the streets to mud and keeping most residents indoors. Brielle had just finished writing up her patient notes when a knock came at her door. Nathan stood on her porch, rain dripping from his hat brim, holding a package wrapped in oilcloth. "Evening, doctor. Thought you might want some company on this miserable night, and some of Mrs. Cooper's apple pie." Brielle hesitated only briefly before stepping aside to let him in. Propriety demanded she refuse. A single woman entertaining a man alone in the evening would set tongues wagging. But the thought of another solitary night with only her memories for company was suddenly unbearable. "I was just making tea," she said, closing the door against the howling wind. They settled at her small kitchen table, the pie between them and steaming cups of tea warming their hands. Nathan removed his hat but kept his distance, respecting the boundaries of her personal space in a way that made her both grateful and oddly disappointed. "How's Tommy doing?" she asked, searching for neutral conversation. "Back to full duties this week. Says he owes you his life. He owes himself. He's young and strong. His body did the healing." Nathan smiled. Always modest, it's refreshing. The conversation flowed easily after that, moving from town gossip to books they'd both read to Nathan's plans for expanding his cattle operation. Brielle found herself relaxing, laughing at his stories about ranch mishaps and offering her own tales of medical school misadventures. As the storm raged outside, they moved to sit before the small fireplace in her living quarters, the remains of the pie forgotten. In the flickering light, with rain lashing the windows and thunder occasionally shaking the house. There was an intimacy to their conversation that both thrilled and frightened Brielle. "I've been meaning to ask," Nathan said during a lull in their talk. "Why did you really come to Hamilton? A doctor with your training could work anywhere." Brielle stared into the flames. "I told you, my uncle's practice could have been sold to any number of doctors looking for a practice out west," Nathan finished gently. "You're running from something, Brielle, or someone." She looked up sharply. "That's presumptuous." "Maybe, but I recognized the look, saw it in the mirror enough after the war." His voice softened. "Whatever it is, it's eating at you. I saw it that morning at the Petersons." Perhaps it was the storm, or the late hour, or simply the kindness in his eyes, but Brielle suddenly couldn't maintain the wall she'd built around her pain. "I had rheumatic fever 3 years ago," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "It was severe. I nearly died." Nathan's expression was grave but patient, encouraging her to continue. "The infection damaged my reproductive organs. The doctors said I would never be able to bear children." She swallowed hard. "My fiancé, he pretended it didn't matter, but I could see the truth in his eyes. His family had expectations, heirs, a proper wife who could give him sons." "So you broke the engagement," Nathan guessed. Brielle nodded. He seemed relieved, honestly. It was all very civilized. "He's married now to the banker's daughter. She's expecting their second child." "I'm sorry," Nathan said quietly. "Don't be. It was for the best." She forced a smile. "But you can imagine how it felt, delivering that baby the other morning, seeing that joy I'll never experience." "Is that why you came west, to escape those reminders?" "Partly. But also because I needed purpose. Here, being a doctor isn't just my profession, it's who I am. In Philadelphia, I was always going to be the poor girl who couldn't fulfill her womanly duties, no matter how many patients I healed." The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. She hadn't realized how much anger she still carried. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving her face. "Can I tell you something I learned after the war?" Brielle nodded, grateful for the shift in focus. "When I came back, I felt broken. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't connect with people who hadn't seen what I'd seen. My brother, he tried to understand, but how could he? So I came west, thinking I'd leave it all behind." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "But you don't outrun pain, Brielle. You just bring it with you to a new place. What heals you is finding meaning again. Finding people who see you, all of you, and value what's there." Their eyes locked, and in that moment, Brielle knew he was speaking of more than just his own experience. Something shifted between them, a bridge forming across the space that had separated them. The storm chose that moment to unleash a particularly violent thunderclap, making them both jump. The spell broken, Brielle rose to her feet. "It's late. You should go before the storm gets worse." Nathan stood slowly, putting his hat back on. At the door, he turned to her. "Thank you for trusting me with your story. Thank you for listening." He hesitated, then reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch feather light. "For what it's worth, any man who couldn't see your worth beyond your ability to bear children was a fool." Before she could respond, he was gone, disappearing into the storm-lashed night and leaving Brielle with a curious warmth spreading through her chest, despite the chill air that had rushed in through the open door. The 4th of July brought Hamilton's biggest celebration of the year. The entire town gathered for a picnic in the meadow by the river, with games, music, dancing, and enough food to feed 3 counties. Brielle had been persuaded to attend by Martha Wilson, who insisted that even doctors needed holidays. She wore her best dress for the occasion, a sky-blue cotton with white trim, that her mother had sent as a going-away present. With her hair arranged more simply than she would have worn it in Philadelphia, and a straw hat to shield her face from the sun. Brielle felt almost carefree as she made her way to the celebration. Children ran between blankets spread on the grass, their laughter mingling with the fiddle music coming from a makeshift stage. Tables groaned under platters of fried chicken, pies, cakes, and every imaginable side dish. Men gathered around a horseshoe pit, while women clustered in groups, talking and keeping watchful eyes on their youngsters. Brielle was welcomed warmly, no longer a curiosity but a respected member of the community. She had proven herself over the past month, treating everything from snake bites to summer colds with competence and compassion. "Dr. Nolan, over here." Martha Wilson waved from a blanket where she sat with several other town matrons. As Brielle made her way over, she spotted Nathan across the meadow, engaged in what appeared to be a good-natured argument with the blacksmith. He wore a clean white shirt with his usual jeans and boots, his dark hair combed back neatly. When he laughed at something the blacksmith said, the sound carried across the picnic grounds, making Brielle smile involuntarily. Their eyes met briefly across the distance, and he tipped his hat to her with a warm smile that set her heart racing. "That boy's sweet on you, Mrs." Cooper observed, following Brielle's gaze. "Never seen Nathan Blackett look at anyone the way he looks at you." "We're friends," Brielle said firmly, settling onto the blanket. "Nothing more." The women exchanged knowing glances but let the subject drop, turning instead to town gossip and praise for the perfect weather. As the afternoon progressed, Brielle found herself enjoying the celebration more than she'd anticipated. She joined in a three-legged race with the schoolteacher. They came in last, collapsing in laughter, sampled dishes from every table, and even allowed herself to be pulled into a circle dance when the fiddlers struck up a lively tune. It was during this dance that Nathan finally approached her, cutting in smoothly to take her hand. "Didn't know doctors could dance," he teased as they circled each other. "There are many things you don't know about me, Mr. Blackett," she replied, breathless from both the dance and his proximity. "I'm hoping to learn," he said, his voice dropping lower as the dance brought them close together again. When the music ended, he didn't release her hand immediately. "Walk with me. There's something I want to show you." Conscious of the interested looks they were receiving, Brielle nonetheless allowed him to lead her away from the main celebration, toward the river that curved around the meadow. "Where are we going?" she asked as they followed a narrow path through cottonwood trees. "Just a little farther. It's worth it, I promise." The path opened onto a small clearing by the water's edge, hidden from the main picnic grounds by a bend in the river. Someone Nathan, she presumed, had spread a blanket on the grass and left a small basket. "I thought you might appreciate a moment away from everyone," he explained. "Town celebrations can get overwhelming." "How thoughtful," she said, genuinely touched by his consideration. "Though people will talk if we're missed." Nathan shrugged. "People already talk. Might as well give them something worth talking about." He helped her sit on the blanket, then joined her, maintaining a respectful distance. From the basket, he produced 2 glasses and a bottle of apple cider. "Not as exciting as whiskey, but more appropriate for a town doctor," he said with a wink. They sat in companionable silence for a while, sipping cider and watching the river flow past. In the distance, they could hear the music and laughter from the celebration, but it felt like they were in their own private world. "I've been thinking about what you told me," Nathan said finally, setting down his glass. "About not being able to have children." Brielle tensed. "I'd rather not discuss, please," he interrupted gently. "Just hear me out." She nodded reluctantly. "After the war, I came west with my younger brother, Daniel. He was 16, full of dreams about cowboy adventures. We worked cattle drives together, saved every penny to buy our first piece of land. He was there when I built the first cabin at Blackwater. Nathan's voice grew softer, tinged with old grief. 2 years in, Daniel got thrown from a horse during a thunderstorm, broke his neck. Died in my arms before I could get him to a doctor. "I'm so sorry," Brielle said, reaching out instinctively to touch his hand. "For a long time after, I thought my chance at family died with him. Our parents were gone, no other siblings. I was alone." He turned to face her fully. "But then something happened. Tommy came along orphaned, sleeping in my barn, stealing eggs to survive. Then Jose, whose father died in a mining accident. Then the Miller brothers, whose mother couldn't feed them after their father abandoned the family." Understanding dawned on Brielle. "You took them in?" Nathan nodded. "Not legally at first, just gave them jobs, meals, a place to sleep. But over time they became more. Now Tommy calls me boss in front of others, but Nate when it's just us. Jose writes to his mother about my other father who taught me to rope. The Miller boys fight over who gets to ride with me when I check the north pasture." His blue eyes were intent on hers. "Family isn't always about blood, Brielle. Sometimes it's about who you choose to love, who needs the love you have to give." Tears pricked at her eyes. "That's different. You're a man. You can take in strays, give them work. A woman alone can be a different kind of mother," he finished. "To patients who need more than just medicine, to a community that needs healing in ways beyond the physical." He reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "You're already doing it, don't you see? The way you sit with Mrs. Abernathy long after her treatment is done because her children have all moved away. How you taught Sally Jenkins to read while her broken leg was healing. The stories you tell the Miller children when they're sick to make them forget their fevers." Brielle hadn't realized he'd noticed these things, these small kindnesses she performed without thinking. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "I'm saying there are many ways to be a mother, Brielle Nolan. And from what I've seen, you're already a damn good one." The words hit her like a physical force, breaking something open inside her that had been tightly locked away. Tears flowed freely now, years of grief and shame finally finding release. Nathan pulled her gently into his arms, letting her cry against his shoulder. He held her without speaking, one hand stroking her hair, the other steady at her back. When the storm of emotion finally passed, Brielle pulled back, embarrassed by her outburst. "I'm sorry. I don't apologize," Nathan said softly. "Not for feeling." He was so close now, his face just inches from hers. Brielle knew she should move away, maintain propriety, but found herself leaning closer instead. The distant boom of fireworks startled them both. Looking up, they saw colorful bursts of light above the trees, signaling the celebration's finale. "We should get back," Brielle said reluctantly. Nathan nodded, helping her to her feet, but before they started down the path, he caught her hand. "Brielle," he said, his voice low and serious, "I didn't bring you here just to philosophize about family. No, no," he took a deep breath. "I brought you here because I'm falling in love with you and I thought you should know." The words hung in the air between them, as bright and startling as the fireworks overhead. "Nathan, you don't need to say anything now," he interrupted gently. "I know it's soon. I know you came here to start fresh, not to find romance, but I want to be clear about my intentions." He squeezed her hand. "Take all the time you need, I'll be here." With that, he led her back toward the celebration, leaving Brielle's thoughts in turmoil and her heart beating a rhythm that felt suspiciously like hope. The weeks following the 4th of July celebration brought changes to Hamilton and to Brielle's life. A heat wave descended on the territory, making tempers short and medical emergencies frequent. Brielle treated cases of heat exhaustion, sunstroke, and injuries from fights that broke out in the stifling saloon. Through it all, Nathan remained a steady presence. He never pressed her for a response to his declaration, instead showing his feelings through actions, bringing her lunch during busy days, escorting her home after late-night medical calls, fixing the loose board on her porch without being asked. Brielle found herself looking forward to these moments, these small intersections of their lives. She caught herself watching for him from her window, smiling at the sound of his voice outside her office, thinking of things to tell him throughout her day. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late July when catastrophe struck. Brielle was examining a young girl with a persistent cough when shouts erupted from the street. Moments later, her door burst open. "Fire!" a man yelled. "The lumber mill's ablaze and it's spreading fast." Brielle grabbed her medical bag and followed the crowd rushing toward the east end of town, where black smoke already billowed into the sky. The mill, built of seasoned timber and filled with sawdust, had become an inferno in minutes. Worse, the flames were jumping to nearby buildings, threatening to engulf that entire section of Hamilton. Men formed bucket brigades from the town's wells, while others brought water from the creek. Women helped evacuate homes and shops in the fire's path. The air filled with shouts, screams, and the terrifying crackle and roar of the spreading blaze. Nathan appeared through the smoke, his face blackened, shirt soaked with sweat. "Brielle, thank God. We've got injured men, burned, smoke, a couple trapped under fallen beams." She followed him to where the wounded had been gathered in the yard of the church, well away from the fire. For the next several hours, Brielle worked without rest, treating burns, setting broken bones, and administering what comfort she could to those beyond saving. The sun was setting by the time the fire was finally contained. 4 buildings had been completely destroyed, including the mill and 2 homes. 5 men were dead, including the mill owner, with nearly 20 others injured to varying degrees. Brielle sat on the church steps, exhaustion washing over her in waves. Her dress was ruined, her hands blistered from touching hot metal instruments, and her throat raw from the smoke. "Here." Nathan appeared beside her, offering a cup of water. His own condition was little better, a hastily bandaged cut across his forearm, soot coating every visible inch of skin, and a weariness in his eyes that spoke of what he'd seen that day. "Thank you," she rasped, drinking deeply. "You were amazing today," he said, sinking down beside her. 3 men who would have died are alive because of you. And 5 who aren't," she replied bitterly, "including Jacob Miller, his boys." "I know," Nathan's voice was heavy. "I've already spoken to them. They'll stay at the ranch for now." They sat in silence, watching as townspeople sifted through the ruins, salvaging what could be saved. "I keep thinking about what you said," Brielle said finally, "about there being many ways to be a mother. Today, watching those boys lose their father." Nathan waited, patient as always. "Maybe you're right," she continued. "Maybe it's not about bearing children, but about being there for those who need you." "It is," he said simply. She turned to look at him, really look at him, this man who had rebuilt himself after war, who had created family from broken pieces, who saw in her something she had stopped seeing in herself. "Nathan," she began, not entirely sure what she wanted to say. He covered her hand with his, the touch grounding her. "When you're ready, Brielle. No rush." But as she looked at the devastation around them, at the reminder of how quickly life could be taken, Brielle realized that time wasn't guaranteed. What mattered was the present, this moment, this choice. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she said softly. "And it terrifies me." The smile that broke across his soot-streaked face was like sunrise. Best kind of terrifying there is. In the aftermath of the fire, Hamilton pulled together as communities often do in times of crisis. Donations poured in from neighboring towns, and rebuilding began almost immediately. Nathan threw himself into the effort, providing lumber from his land and men from his ranch to help those who had lost homes. Brielle, meanwhile, continued treating the injured and monitoring those still recovering from smoke inhalation. The Miller boys, Samuel, 10, and James, 8, stayed at her office during the days while Nathan worked on rebuilding, helping her with small tasks and slowly emerging from their shell of grief. "Dr. Nolan," Samuel asked one afternoon as he swept the examination room floor, "is Mr. Blackett going to be our new pa?" Brielle nearly dropped the vial of antiseptic she was holding. "Why would you ask that, Samuel?" The boy shrugged. "He said we're staying at his ranch permanent-like, and he's teaching James to ride like he would his own son." "Mr. Blackett is very kind," Brielle said carefully. "He wants to make sure you boys are taken care of. But he likes you special," Samuel persisted. "I seen how he looks at you. That's how Pa used to look at Ma before she died." Out of the mouths of children, Brielle thought, her cheeks warming. "Mr. Blackett and I are good friends." Samuel gave her a knowing look far too mature for his 10 years. "If you say so, madam." That evening, as she closed up her office, Nathan arrived to collect the boys. They ran to him immediately, each trying to outdo the other in reporting their day's activities. Brielle watched with a smile as he knelt to their level, giving each boy his full attention. "Sounds like you two have been a big help to Dr. Nolan," he said, ruffling James's hair. "We're going to be doctors too," James announced. "Samuel's going to fix broken bones and I'm going to pull teeth." "Mighty fine ambitions," Nathan replied seriously. "But I thought you wanted to be a cowboy like me." "Can't I be both?" James asked, his face scrunching in confusion. Nathan laughed. "I suppose you can be anything you set your mind to." He looked up at Brielle, his eyes warm. "Have dinner with us tonight. Mrs. Cooper sent over a pot of stew big enough to feed an army." She hesitated only briefly. "I'd like that." The Blackwater ranch house was larger than Brielle had expected, a sprawling 2-story structure of sturdy logs with a wide front porch and multiple chimneys. Inside, it was furnished simply but comfortably, with worn leather chairs, hand-woven rugs, and bookcases filled with volumes that suggested Nathan was more well-read than his cowboy persona might indicate. The boys led her on a tour, proudly showing off their new bedroom, the kitchen where Mrs. Cooper came 3 times a week to cook enough food to last till she comes back, and Nathan's study, where maps of the territory covered one wall. Dinner was served at a long oak table that could easily seat 12. Tommy and Jose joined them, along with 2 other ranch hands whose names Brielle vaguely remembered from treating minor injuries. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and good-natured teasing. Brielle, watching Nathan at the head of the table, surrounded by this makeshift family, felt a sense of rightness she hadn't experienced in years. Here was proof of what he'd told her, that family wasn't just about blood, but about connection, about choosing to love. After the meal, the boys were sent to wash up for bed, and the ranch hands retreated to the bunkhouse. Nathan poured 2 glasses of brandy and led Brielle to the porch, where they settled into rocking chairs to watch the sunset paint the mountains gold. "This is beautiful," she said, gesturing to the vista before them. "It is," Nathan agreed, though his eyes were on her rather than the scenery. "I never get tired of it." They rocked in companionable silence for a while, sipping brandy and listening to the evening chorus of insects. "The boys asked if you were going to be their new father," Brielle said finally. Nathan didn't seem surprised. "They've been asking me similar questions about you." "Oh, James wants to know if doctors know how to make pancakes." Samuel is concerned that you might not like dogs since you don't have one at your office. Brielle laughed. And what did you tell them? That they'd have to ask you themselves, Nathan replied, his expression turning serious. But that if I had my way, they'd have plenty of opportunity to find out. The implication was clear. Brielle felt her heart racing but forced herself to speak calmly. Nathan, we've known each other barely 2 months. I knew after 2 weeks, he said simply. Sometimes you just know. It's not that simple. My condition doesn't change how I feel, he interrupted. I told you before, Brielle, family is what we make it. He set down his glass and turned to face her fully. I love you. I want to build a life with you here, at Blackwater, with the boys, with whatever other children need a home. I want to wake up beside you and go to sleep with you in my arms. I want to grow old watching you heal this town. The sincerity in his voice, in his eyes, was unmistakable. This wasn't the practiced proposal of a Philadelphia gentleman, but the honest declaration of a man who knew his own mind. What about children of our own? She asked, needing to be certain he understood what he was giving up. Most men want heirs, Nathan. Blood continuation. I want you, he said firmly. The rest is details. Besides, he added with a small smile, we've got plenty of children already in need of parents. Why add to the world's population when we can help those already here? Put that way, it seemed so simple. Brielle looked out at the mountains, thinking of the life she'd left behind, the pain and shame she'd carried west. Here, with this man, she could build something new, not in spite of her limitations, but simply as herself. I need time, she said finally. Not because I don't love you, I do. But because this is too important to rush. Nathan nodded, relief evident in his expression. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. He reached across the space between their chairs to take her hand, and they sat together as darkness fell, each lost in thoughts of the future they might share. August brought the hottest days of summer, turning Hamilton into a dusty oven that tested everyone's patience. Nathan continued bringing the Miller boys to Brielle's office each morning, collecting them each evening with increasingly transparent excuses to linger. Their courtship progressed in these small moments: shared meals, evening walks, Sunday afternoons reading on her porch. Nathan was unfailingly patient, never pushing for more than Brielle was ready to give, though his eyes often spoke of deeper desires. On a particularly stifling Wednesday, with heat shimmering above the streets and most townspeople retreating indoors, a rider came pounding down Main Street, shouting for the doctor. Indian attack at the Carson homestead, he yelled as townspeople emerged to investigate the commotion. 3 dead, others wounded. Brielle grabbed her medical bag and hurried outside. I need details, she called to the rider. How many injured? What types of wounds? Don't know exactly, madam. I was sent to fetch you and any men willing to help. They've barricaded in the root cellar, but Mrs. Carson's been shot and her daughter's bleeding bad. Sheriff Taylor was already organizing a response, deputizing several men on the spot. Dr. Nolan, you stay here. We'll bring the wounded to you once we've secured the area. No, Brielle said firmly. If Mrs. Carson and her daughter are critically injured, they may not survive the journey. I'm coming with you. It's not safe. Then provide me protection, Sheriff, but I'm going. That's final. Her tone brooked no argument. Within minutes, she was mounted behind one of the deputies, riding hard for the Carson homestead some 5 miles outside town. Nathan and his ranch hands joined the rescue party en route, having heard the commotion from where they were repairing fences near the road. His face, when he saw Brielle among the riders, registered first shock, then concern, and finally a grudging admiration. You're either the bravest or the most foolhardy woman I've ever met, he told her as they rode. Mrs. Carson delivered her own baby last winter when the pass was snowed in, Brielle replied. I owe her my presence now. The Carson homestead was a scene of devastation. The house had been ransacked, the barn burned, and livestock slaughtered in the fields. 3 bodies lay covered with blankets near the well. Mr. Carson and 2 farmhands, according to the terrified neighbor who emerged from hiding as the rescue party arrived. There in the root cellar, he said, pointing to a partially concealed door at the back of the property. Mrs. Carson, her daughter Emma, the baby, and young Billy. Emma was hit bad arrow in her side. Mrs. Carson took a bullet trying to reach her husband. Brielle was off her horse and running toward the cellar before the man finished speaking, Nathan close behind her. Inside the dark, earthy space, she found a scene from a nightmare. Mrs. Carson lay on her back on a dirt floor, her face gray with pain, a bloodied bandage around her shoulder. Beside her, 16-year-old Emma writhed in agony, an arrow shaft protruding from her lower abdomen. 10-year-old Billy huddled in a corner, clutching his baby sister and rocking back and forth, his eyes wide with shock. I'm here, Clara, Brielle said, kneeling beside Mrs. Carson. Dr. Nolan, we're going to help you. Emma first, the woman gasped. Please, my girl. Brielle nodded, turning to Nathan. I need light, clean water if possible, and my instruments, and privacy. Get the men out of here. For the next hour, Brielle worked frantically to save both women. Emma's injury was more immediately life-threatening. The arrow had punctured her liver, causing internal bleeding that turned her lips blue and her skin cold. Removing it was delicate, dangerous work, made more challenging by the primitive conditions. Mrs. Carson's gunshot wound was through and through, having missed vital organs but causing significant blood loss. She drifted in and out of consciousness as Brielle cleaned and stitched both entry and exit wounds. By the time both patients were stabilized, Brielle was soaked with sweat and blood, her hands trembling with exhaustion. Outside, she could hear the men preparing to transport the injured back to town. They'll need constant monitoring, she told Nathan, who had stayed to assist her. The journey itself could kill them, he nodded grimly. I've sent for my wagon. It has better springs than the others. We'll pad it with blankets, make it as comfortable as possible. The children will come to Blackwater, he finished. It's closest and they need safety now, not questions. As they emerged from the root cellar, Sheriff Taylor approached. Indians are long gone. War party looks like maybe 6 or 7 braves, probably renegades from the reservation. Have there been other attacks? Nathan asked, his arm protectively around Billy, who still clutched his baby sister. Not yet, but I'm sending riders to warn outlying homesteads. Might need to bring folks into town until the army can handle this. The ride back to Hamilton was tense, with scouts ranging ahead and behind to watch for further attacks. In the wagon, Brielle sat between her patients, monitoring their pulses and breathing, praying the jolting journey wouldn't reopen their wounds. News of the attack spread quickly. By the time they reached town, a crowd had gathered, offering help, demanding information, some calling for revenge against all Indians regardless of their involvement. Take the women to my office, Brielle instructed as Nathan helped lift the stretchers from the wagon. Sheriff, please keep the crowd back. They need quiet and clean conditions. For the next 3 days, Brielle barely left her patients' sides. Emma hovered between life and death, developing a fever that Brielle fought with cool compresses and willow bark tea. Mrs. Carson regained consciousness, but remained weak from blood loss and the trauma of witnessing her husband's death. Nathan brought the children to visit briefly each day, reporting that Billy was still largely silent but beginning to eat again, while baby Ruth seemed mercifully unaware of the tragedy. gurgling happily in the arms of whoever held her. On the fourth night, as Brielle sat dozing in a chair between the two sips, a soft touch on her shoulder startled her awake. "You need rest," Nathan said gently. "Real rest in a bed. I've asked Mrs. Wilson to sit with them for a few hours." "I can't leave." "You can, and you will," he insisted. "You're no good to them if you collapse from exhaustion." Too tired to argue, Brielle allowed him to lead her to her living quarters at the back of the office. He helped her remove her shoes and outer dress, then tucked her into bed with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "Sleep now," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I'll wake you if there's any change." She was asleep before he reached the door. Morning brought a turning point. Emma's fever broke, and Mrs. Carson managed to take broth and speak coherently about the attack. The immediate danger had passed, though recovery would be long and complicated by grief. "What happens to them now?" Brielle asked Nathan as they stood outside her office, watching the sun rise over the mountains. "Clara has no family out here. Her people are all back east." "She has us," Nathan replied simply. "This community. We'll help her rebuild if that's what she wants. Or help her get back east if she prefers." Brielle leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "You make it sound so straightforward." "It is, in a way. People help each other out here. Have to, or nobody survives." She looked up at him, this man who had become the center of her world in such a short time. "I love you," she said softly. "I know I've been cautious, asking for time, but I don't want to waste another day wondering what might be. Life's too uncertain." Nathan's face broke into that sunrise smile she'd come to cherish. "Are you saying what I think you're saying, Dr. Nolan?" "I'm saying yes," she replied, her own smile matching his. "Yes to all of it, to you, to Blackwater, to building whatever family comes our way." His kiss was gentle at first, mindful of their public location, but quickly deepened into something that promised more when privacy allowed. When they finally parted, both breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "You've made me the happiest man in the territory," he whispered. "Even knowing I can't give you children of your own?" she had to ask one last time. He pulled back to look at her directly. "Brielle, listen to me. The Miller boys need parents. Billy and baby Ruth need a home. How many more children out there need the same? We'll have the family we're meant to have, one built on love and choice rather than obligation." The simplicity of his acceptance, the depth of his love, washed away the last of Brielle's doubts. This was what she had come west to find, though she hadn't known it then, not just purpose, but belonging. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony in the town church, with half of Hamilton in attendance. Samuel and James Miller served as ring bearers, their solemn faces breaking into grins when the minister pronounced Nathan and Brielle husband and wife. The celebration that followed at Blackwater Ranch lasted well into the night, with dancing in the yard, tables groaning with food contributed by seemingly every woman in the county, and enough well wishes to last a lifetime. As evening fell, Nathan led his bride onto the porch, away from the festivities for a moment of quiet. "Happy, Mrs. Blackett?" he asked, his arms around her waist. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied truthfully. "Though I think I'll remain Dr. Nolan professionally. The town's just gotten used to me," he laughed, spinning her in a small circle. "Whatever you want, my love. Though I have to say I'm looking forward to having my own personal physician. Very convenient for a rancher my age." "Your age? You're barely 35. "Ancient in cowboy years," he said solemnly. "All that hard living takes its toll." She swatted his arm playfully. "You seem in fine health to me, Mr. Blackett." His eyes darkened with desire. "Care to conduct a more thorough examination later, doctor?" Her blush was answer enough. Autumn came to Montana with breathtaking beauty aspen trees turning gold against evergreen mountainsides, mornings crisp with frost, evenings perfect for gathering around the hearth fire. Brielle divided her time between her practice in town and her new life at Blackwater, finding balance in the dual roles of doctor and ranch mistress. The Miller boys had officially become Blacketts in August, when the circuit judge granted Nathan's petition for adoption. Billy Carson and his baby sister joined the household after their mother's death from complications in September, despite Brielle's desperate efforts to save her. 4 children, Nathan remarked one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the boys chase fireflies in the yard while Ruth slept in Brielle's arms. If someone had told me a year ago I'd be responsible for 4 children, I'd have thought they were mad. Having regrets? Brielle asked, only half teasing. He reached over to stroke Ruth's downy head. Not a single one, though we might need to add onto the house if our family keeps growing at this rate. The first snow fell in early November, turning Blackwater into a wonderland of white. Brielle stood at the window of the study, watching the flakes drift down, when she felt Nathan's arms encircle her from behind. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" he murmured against her ear. "Philadelphia," she admitted. "The first snow there always made me melancholy." It marked another year ending, another season of expectations unfulfilled. And now, she turned in his embrace, looking up at the face she'd come to know better than her own. "Now I see beginnings, not endings, possibilities, not limitations." He smiled, that same smile that had first caught her attention through a window in Hamilton months ago. "Including the possibility that Samuel might actually finish his chores without being reminded 3 times, she laughed, grateful as always for his ability to lighten her mood. Let's not expect miracles. Later that evening, as the children were settled in bed with stories and kisses, Ruth in her cradle, Billy in his own room, the Miller boys sharing theirs, Brielle found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her west. She had come to Hamilton broken in some fundamental way, convinced that her inability to bear children had diminished her worth as a woman. She had defined motherhood in the narrowest terms, seeing only what she couldn't have rather than what she could give. Now, listening to the quiet breathing of 4 children who called her Ma or Mama, or, in Ruth's case, cheerful babbling that might someday become those words, Brielle understood what Nathan had been trying to tell her that day by the river. There were indeed many ways to be a mother. "Ready for bed?" Nathan asked, coming to stand beside her in the hallway. "Almost," she replied. "I just wanted to check on them one more time." "You're a wonderful mother," he said softly, as if reading her thoughts. "They're lucky to have you." She leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. "We're all lucky to have each other." Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the ranch in a blanket of pristine white. But inside, in this home built of love and second chances, Brielle Blackett had finally found the warmth she'd been seeking all her life. As spring returned to Montana in 1879, bringing with it new calves, wildflowers, and longer days, the Blackett family of Blackwater Ranch continued to thrive. James and Samuel excelled in school, with Samuel showing a genuine interest in medicine that delighted Brielle. Billy had finally begun to speak more, especially to Nathan, whom he followed like a shadow whenever possible. Baby Ruth took her first steps across the kitchen floor one sunny April morning, causing a celebration that lasted all day. Brielle's practice flourished as well. She had trained Martha Wilson's daughter, Eleanor, as a nurse's assistant, allowing her to see more patients and even plan for a small expansion to the office. The town council, impressed by her dedication during a winter influenza outbreak, voted to provide funds for new medical equipment and a dedicated surgery room. Nathan, meanwhile, had nearly doubled the size of his cattle operation, hiring more hands and purchasing adjacent land when it became available. Blackwater Ranch was now one of the most prosperous in the territory, its success a testament to Nathan's hard work and vision. "I've been thinking," he said one evening as they sat on their favorite porch swing after the children were in bed. "Always a dangerous proposition," Brielle teased, nestled against his side. He chuckled, kissing the top of her head. "Cheeky woman." "I've been thinking about that parcel west of the creek, the one with the old trapper's cabin." "What about it?" "It might make a good place for a school. A proper one, I mean, not just the room above the general store. Hamilton's growing. There are nearly 30 children of school age now." Brielle sat up to look at him. "A school? That's an ambitious project." "I thought we might donate the land, maybe contribute to the building costs. The town could hire a real teacher, someone with training, not just the minister's wife when she has time." "You've given this some thought," she observed. Nathan nodded. "Education matters. Our boys deserve better than I had piecemeal lessons whenever we stayed in one place long enough." The casual way he said "our boys" still warmed Brielle's heart, even after months of marriage. Nathan never distinguished between the children they had taken in. They were simply ours in his mind and heart. "I think it's a wonderful idea," she said. "Though you might want to discuss it with Sheriff Taylor before the next town meeting. Get his support." "Already did. He thinks it could help with some of the trouble we've been having with the older boys, give them something productive to focus on." Brielle smiled, once again impressed by her husband's foresight. "You'll make it happen, I know." Later, as they lay together in the darkness of their bedroom, Nathan's breathing even in sleep beside her, Brielle reflected on how far they had come in less than a year. From strangers to friends to lovers to partners in every sense, building a life neither could have imagined before. She thought of what she'd told him that first night by the fire, "I'll never bear children," and how his response had changed everything. There are many ways to be a mother. He had been right, of course. Motherhood wasn't just about bearing children. It was about nurturing, protecting, teaching, loving. It was Samuel's face lighting up when he correctly diagnosed a simple case of hives. It was James's proud grin when he finally learned to rope a calf. It was Billy's tentative smile when she kissed his forehead at bedtime. It was Ruth's tiny hands patting her cheeks while saying "Mama" over and over. Outside their window, spring rain began to fall, gentle and life-giving. Brielle closed her eyes, listening to its rhythm on the roof, to Nathan's steady breathing beside her, to the occasional creak of the house settling around her sleeping family. This, she thought as sleep finally claimed her, was what it meant to be whole. 10 years later, on a bright June morning in 1889, Brielle Blackett stood on the porch of Blackwater Ranch, watching as a wagon approached down the long drive. Beside her, Nathan shaded his eyes against the sun, then broke into a wide smile. "It's them," he said, squeezing her hand. Right on time for once. The wagon held Samuel, now 20, returning from his first year at medical school in Denver. Beside him sat a young woman Brielle recognized from his letters, Margaret Collins, his fiancée and fellow medical student. "Ma, Pa," Samuel called as the wagon drew closer. He looked so grown up, so different from the solemn 10-year-old who had come to them a decade ago. Nathan leaped from the porch, striding to meet the wagon before it fully stopped. He engulfed his son in a bear hug that lifted Samuel off his feet, then turned to help Margaret down with exaggerated gallantry that made the young woman laugh. Brielle followed more sedately, though her heart raced with excitement. Having Samuel home, even for the summer break, felt like a piece of herself returning. "Dr. Nolan Blackett," Samuel said formally as he approached, then broke into a grin and hugged her tightly. "I've missed you so much." "We've missed you too," she said, blinking back tears. "All of us." "Speaking of which," Nathan said, glancing toward the house, "where is everyone? I sent James to round up the troops an hour ago." As if on cue, the front door burst open and Ruth, now 11 and all gangly limbs and flying braids, raced down the steps. "Samuel, you're back. Did you bring me anything? Did you see any famous people in Denver? Is that your sweetheart? She's pretty." Behind her came Billy, 15 and nearly as tall as Nathan, moving with the self-conscious dignity of a young man not wanting to appear too eager, though his smile betrayed his excitement. And finally, James, 19, who had chosen ranching over academics and worked alongside Nathan with a natural aptitude that made them more partners than father and son. Introductions were made, bags were unloaded, and the family moved inside for the welcome home dinner Brielle and Ruth had spent the morning preparing. The dining room echoed with laughter and overlapping conversations as Samuel regaled them with stories of medical school. Margaret shyly shared her experiences as one of only 3 women in their class, and everyone caught up on the events of Hamilton and Blackwater. "You wouldn't recognize the town," James told his brother. "We've got a hotel with 3 stories now, a new church, and they're talking about bringing the railroad through next year. Not to mention the school Pa built is bursting at the seams," Billy added. "They've hired a second teacher just for the little ones. And Ma's hospital is the best in the territory," Ruth declared proudly. "People come from all over when they're really sick." Brielle smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. The hospital was really just an expansion of her original office, 4 beds for overnight patients, a proper surgery, and a small laboratory, but it had indeed become known throughout the region for quality care. "Nathan made it all possible," she said, looking at her husband with gratitude. "His donation of land and materials, his endless lobbying of the town council. Our partnership made it possible," Nathan corrected gently. "I just provided the resources. You provided the expertise and determination." After dinner, while Ruth showed Margaret her collection of pressed wildflowers and the boys disappeared to the barn to inspect a new foal, Brielle and Nathan returned to their favorite spot, the porch swing that had witnessed so many conversations over the years. "Happy?" Nathan asked, just as he had on their wedding night. "Incredibly so," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "Samuel looks well, doesn't he? Medical school agrees with him. He's going to be a fine doctor. Learned from the best." Nathan's arm tightened around her. "Though I think he's going to have his hands full with that Margaret. Smart as a whip, that one." "They remind me of us in a way," Brielle mused. "Stubborn, dedicated, partners." Nathan chuckled. "Poor Samuel." She elbowed him lightly. "I wasn't that difficult." "I'll never bear children," he quoted, mimicking her serious tone from that long-ago conversation. "As if that would have changed how I felt about you." "It might have, for some men." "I'm not some men." His voice softened. "And look what we've built together, Brielle. 4 amazing children. A ranch that will support generations. A medical practice that serves the entire county." Brielle looked out over the land that had become their legacy, the sprawling ranch house, now twice its original size, the new barn gleaming red in the afternoon sun, fields dotted with cattle, and beyond, the mountains that had witnessed their journey from strangers to family. "We should have the wedding here," she said suddenly. "Samuel and Margaret's, in the meadow by the creek where we had our first real conversation." Nathan's eyes lit up. "That's perfect, if they agree, of course." "They will. I saw how Margaret looked when she first saw Blackwater. This place works its way into your heart. Like its mistress," Nathan said, kissing her softly. As the sun began to set, painting the Montana sky in shades of pink and gold, Brielle thought about the twists and turns that had brought her to this moment. The fever that had taken her ability to bear children, but ultimately led her west. The chance meeting with a cowboy who saw beyond her limitations to her true worth. The children who had come into their lives, each bringing unique joys and challenges. "I was thinking," Nathan said, breaking into her thoughts, "that we might take in those Jenkins twins." "The ones who lost their parents in the river crossing?" Brielle asked, though she already knew. The tragedy had struck the community hard the previous month. Nathan nodded. "They're staying with the Wilsons for now, but Martha's getting on in years. She can't chase after 7-year-old boys indefinitely. You want to adopt them, at our age." Brielle was 51, Nathan 59, no longer young, though both remained active and healthy. "Why not? The house is getting empty with Samuel away and James talking about building his own place next year." He gave her a sidelong glance. "Unless you're looking forward to peace and quiet in our old age," Brielle laughed, the sound carrying across the darkening yard. "When have we ever had peace and quiet, Nathan Blackett? Why start now?" His answering smile was as bright as it had been on that first day in Hamilton, when a new doctor had watched a kind cowboy helping an elderly woman with her packages. "That's my girl," he said. "Always room for more love." "Always," she agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss as stars began to appear overhead. In the years that followed, the Jenkins twins did indeed join the Blackett family, followed by 3 other orphaned or abandoned children who needed homes. Each time, Nathan and Brielle opened their hearts and Blackwater's doors without hesitation, expanding the definition of family with every addition. Samuel became a respected physician, eventually taking over his mother's practice when Brielle semi-retired at 65. He and Margaret had 2 daughters of their own, both of whom followed their parents into medicine. James married the schoolteacher's daughter and built a house on Blackwater land, raising cattle and 5 children who kept the ranch thriving. Billy became a lawyer, representing ranchers' interests in land disputes and water rights cases throughout the territory. And Ruth, to everyone's surprise, became a journalist, writing for newspapers in Helena and eventually publishing a book about frontier women's experiences. Each summer, they all returned to Blackwater for a family reunion that grew larger every year. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and those connected by bonds stronger than blood. At one such gathering, when Brielle was 76 and Nathan 84, they sat in their well-worn porch swing, watching the newest generation play tag in the yard where so many children had played before. "We did all right, didn't we?" Nathan asked, his voice thinner with age but still carrying that note of quiet confidence she had first loved. Brielle, her dark hair now snow-white but her eyes still bright, squeezed his hand. "Better than all right. We built a legacy, Nathan, not just of land or buildings, but of love." He nodded, watching as Samuel's granddaughter, a serious 6-year-old with her great-grandmother's determined chin, organized the younger children into some complicated game of her own devising. "Remember what I told you that day by the river?" he asked. Brielle smiled, the memory as clear as if it had happened yesterday rather than 50 years ago. "There are many ways to be a mother," she quoted. "You were right, as usual." "Don't let that go to my head," he chuckled. "Too late," she teased, resting her head on his shoulder as she had done countless times over the decades of their marriage. As the sun set on Blackwater Ranch, painting the mountains in the same golden light that had welcomed Brielle to Montana all those years ago, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the young woman who had defined herself by what she couldn't do, to the wife, mother, grandmother, and doctor who had found so many ways to give life and love to others. "I wouldn't change a thing," she said softly, watching their family 27 strong now, counting spouses and children gather for the evening meal. "Not one single thing." Nathan's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Nor would I, my love, nor would I." And as stars began to appear in the Montana sky, Brielle Nolan Blackett gave thanks for the unexpected gift her life had become, a family built not from obligation or expectation, but from choice and love. A legacy that would continue long after she and Nathan were gone, in the lives they had touched and the love they had shared. Many paths led to motherhood, she had learned. Hers had been winding and sometimes painful, but it had led her exactly where she was meant to be, to Blackwater, to Nathan, to the children who called her Ma or Mama or grandmother, and to the profound understanding that family was not about blood, but about belonging.